A man bought a pickup truck and lost his whole family. He's 25, and tonight he eats alone on the porch steps, plate on his knees. Through the kitchen window, his mother sets the table for the other 7. He watches. An oil lamp flickers beside him while forks scrape plates he can't reach. He didn't steal anything. He bought a truck. Standing at the edge of this gravel driveway in Ohio, you feel how strange it is. A whole family. One closed door. Beside you stands Eli, plainly dressed, hat slightly askew, and he just shrugs at the noise your phone makes. "You people never stop beeping," he says. Here's the part that should be impossible. 9 out of 10 people who get shut out like this eventually walk back through that door. On purpose. So what actually happens to an Amish person who breaks the rules? And why do most of them stay anyway? Understand exactly how this works, and it will change how you think about belonging, about family, about what you'd give up to keep both. Let's find out what that son is really choosing, the rule that outlasts you. You probably picture shunning as a quirky Amish custom, like avoiding buttons or driving a buggy. Something old-fashioned and a little sad, but basically random. That's the myth. The sharper truth is that shunning isn't a mood. It's a written rule, agreed on centuries ago, and everyone signed up for it at baptism. Here's where it comes from. The Amish practice of shunning, which they call Meidung, traces straight back to the Dordrecht Confession of Faith, written in the Netherlands in 1632. That document didn't just suggest avoiding excommunicated members. It made it a duty for every baptized person. So, when a man's own family stops eating at the same table with him, they aren't improvising. They're following an article a group of Dutch believers wrote down almost 400 years ago. Think about that. Most rules you follow are younger than your smartphone. This one is older than the United States. The point isn't cruelty. Baptism is the moment you agree to the whole package, including the part where the community can push you out if you break your word. You aren't born into the rule. You choose it, out loud as an adult, which makes the whole thing weirdly modern in a backwards way. A buggy rolls down the shoulder while a semi-truck blasts past at 70. The truck looks like the powerful one, but the buggy is the thing running on a 400-year-old operating system that still boots up every single morning. Eli would just squint at that and say, the buggy hasn't crashed once. So the custom is really a contract, and everyone knows the terms going in. That answers what shunning is. It doesn't answer the harder question. If leaving means losing your parents, your table, your whole world, why would anyone ever walk away from a system that works this well, which is exactly the choice waiting in Chapter 2? Picture the church bench where an elder stops greeting you. You probably think shunning is just a quaint Amish custom. Somebody breaks a small rule, everyone gets frosty, life goes on. But it isn't a mood or a grudge. It's a rule with edges written into how the whole community holds together. Here's the sharper version. Shunning, or Meidung, works like a shared switch every member agrees to flip. When someone breaks their baptism vow and won't turn back, the church stops eating with them, stops trading with them, treats them as outside the circle. Not because everyone's angry, and this is where it gets strange, because that promise nearly tore the movement apart before the Amish even existed. In 1693 in Alsace, a young elder named Jacob Amann insisted the ban be strict, applied to the whole shared table, no exceptions. The Swiss Mennonite elders thought that was too harsh and pushed back hard. So the group split. Sit with that. The single practice you assumed was a minor quirk is the exact fight that created the Amish. Not the beards, not the buggies, not the hats. The shunning, that's the founding argument that gave them a name. So flip the picture. You thought the custom sat near the bottom of what matters. It sits at the very top. The soft, quiet, easy-to-overlook rule is the theological spine everything else hangs from, which makes the whole thing weirdly calm to watch. A buggy rolls down the shoulder while 3 lanes of traffic scream past, and it doesn't flinch because it isn't reacting to your noise at all. It's answering to a rule older than your grandparents' car. Somewhere off-frame, an elder licks his pencil, adds 1 neat tick mark to his little notepad, and slides it back into his coat. But if a rule this strict can start a church, it raises the obvious next question. What actually happens to the person on the wrong side of it, day to day, and why the answer surprises almost everyone is exactly what we open in Chapter 3. So isn't Chapter 3 just some quaint Amish quirk, a rule they follow because Grandpa did? That's the easy read, and it's wrong. You probably picture a teenager sneaking a phone and getting scolded by the whole church. But that's not how the system actually works. The real mechanism is Chapter 3, and it runs on a single question. Are you baptized yet? Before that, you get Rumspringa, the stretch of greater freedom the Amish give their young people around age 16. And here's the part that surprises almost everyone. During Rumspringa, most rule-breaking carries no formal church penalty at all, because unbaptized youth in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania are not yet under the Ordnung, the community's rulebook. You can't punish someone for breaking a contract they never signed. So the teenager buying a car, wearing jeans, listening to a radio, technically none of that lands on the church's ledger. They're free in a way their baptized parents simply are not. That's the whole trick. The rules aren't a random quirk. They're a community rule that switches on the day you choose in. Baptism is the switch. A buggy rolls down the shoulder of a highway, calm, unhurried, while a pickup blasts past with the windows down and the bass rattling. The 17-year-old driving that pickup? Not breaking a single church rule today. His older brother in the buggy, baptized last spring, would be. Same family, same road, two completely different rule books. And once you're baptized, the ledger opens for real. Somewhere off-frame, a small notepad appears, and an elder licks his pencil and adds one neat tick mark, then slides it back into his coat without a flicker of expression. So the strictness isn't cruelty. It's a line you walk over on purpose, eyes open, which raises the sharper question. Once you've crossed that line and you break the rules anyway, what does the community actually do to you, and why is the punishment nothing like a fine or a scolding, which is exactly where we go in Chapter 4. So you'd think Rumspringa is just a quaint Amish custom. Teenagers taste the outside world, then come home. Cute story. The word actually means running around, and it's not a wild free-for-all. It's a decision point built right into the community's rules. Here's the part people miss. Rumspringa isn't the church losing control of its kids. It's the church testing them on purpose. You get to see the phones, the cars, the whole loud world outside, and then you choose. And you'd expect most of them to bolt. Freedom's right there. Sociologist Donald Craybill at Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania actually counted. He found that roughly 80 to 90% of Amish youth who go through Rumspringa choose to be baptized and stay. 9 in 10. They walk out the door, look around, and come home, which tells you the whole thing works as a rule, not a rebellion. The community lets you leave, so your staying actually means something. A promise you didn't get to make freely wouldn't count. Picture a buggy on a 2-lane road in Lancaster County. A pickup roars past doing 70, radio going, driver furious about the 4 seconds he lost. The buggy just clops along at 8 miles an hour. Nobody in it is impressed. That's the choice, basically. You've seen the pickup. You picked the buggy. But here's the catch, and Eli's already squinting at it. If nearly everyone chooses to stay, then baptism isn't a graduation. It's a signature on a contract. And the moment you sign, every rule you were once free to ignore becomes a rule you can now break. Somewhere off-screen, an elder flips open his little notepad. He adds one neat tick mark in pencil, unhurried, then slides it back into his coat. So the question sharpens again. Once you've signed that promise as an adult, what exactly are you signing up to obey? And who decides where every one of those lines actually sits, which is precisely what we untangle in Chapter 5. The rule book problem. You probably picture shunning as one flat Amish custom. A single stern rule, the same in every barn. That's the myth, and it's a tidy one. But it's wrong in the most interesting way. The sharper truth is that shunning is not a quirk at all. It's a community rule, decided locally, enforced locally, and tuned differently everywhere. Nobody mailed out a master copy. Here's how uneven it actually gets. Donald Craybill counts over 40 distinct Amish affiliations across North America. And the severity of shunning varies enormously among them. Old order Amish practice, full social avoidance. You don't eat at the same table as the shunned. But some New Order Amish communities do not shun former members at all. 40 plus. So the same word, Amish, covers a group that will cut off a runaway cousin completely and a group down the road that will happily pass him the potatoes. Same faith, opposite answer. Nobody warns you about that on the brochure. Picture two buggies on the same county road. One belongs to an old order district that avoids a shunned man entirely. The other belongs to a new order district that lets him stay for dinner. They pass each other calmly, wheels clicking, while a semi-truck roars by hauling something to a Walmart. 3 different centuries sharing one stretch of pavement. And somewhere in the corner, an elder flips open his little notepad, adds one neat pencil tick, and slides it back into his coat. No expression. The point is that there's no single Amish rulebook printed anywhere. Each congregation writes its own, argues about its own, and updates its own. It isn't. Because if the rules are local and unwritten, something still has to hold them steady enough that a whole district obeys the same lines for a lifetime. Some engine keeps 40-plus versions from dissolving into chaos. So what actually enforces a rule that nobody wrote down, which is exactly what we take apart in Chapter 6? You break a rule, not a big one. You buy a car. You probably picture the response as one dramatic moment. Someone yells, "You're cast out, doors slam." That's the movie version, and it's wrong. The real thing is slow, patient, and almost bureaucratic in how careful it is. Church discipline is not a mood swing, it's a procedure, and the procedure has steps in order every time. First comes a private word. One person quietly pulls you aside, no witnesses, no meeting. If that doesn't land, they come back, this time with a second person along. Still nothing? Now it goes to a full church council. And only after all that comes a 6-week stretch where you're held at arm's length, given room to turn around. Then, if you still won't budge, comes excommunication. That whole staircase, private word, witnesses, council, probation, isn't invented. It's lifted straight from Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17. The Amish didn't design a clever HR flowchart. They read 3 sentences and built a community rule out of them. Somewhere in the corner, an elder licks his pencil and adds one neat tick to his notepad. He does not sigh. He does not scowl. He slides it back into his coat and waits, because the whole thing runs on patience, not heat. That patience is the point. A modern boss fires you in an afternoon and calls it efficiency. An Amish buggy rolls past a screaming highway of horns and brake lights at 8 miles an hour, entirely unbothered, and somehow that's the confident one. The slow thing knows it has time. 6 weeks says, plainly, we would rather keep you than win. So the custom you thought was a quirk is actually a machine with gears. Myth aside, it's a rule that runs on steps, not tempers. But that raises the obvious question. If the goal is keeping people, why does a rule this gentle end in the harshest thing a community can do? And what happens to a person once the doors actually close, which is where we go in Chapter 7? So doesn't shunning just mean they kick you out and never speak again? That's the movie version, and it's wrong. You probably picture a family slamming the door, a person cast into the night. Most people think shunning means erasing someone completely. But the real thing is quieter and stranger and more precise than that. Shunning isn't a mood, it's a rule with a spine. Under Old Order Amish shunning, called the ban, a shunned member may not eat at the same table as family. They can't receive gifts from members. They can't do business with the community. Every one of those lines is deliberate, and each one bites in a specific way. But here's the part that surprises people. In some districts around Holmes County, Ohio, a shunned person can still physically live in the family home. So you might sleep under the same roof as your mother. Then you sit at a second table while she eats at the first. The distance is measured in a few feet. That's the whole point. It's near enough to feel, close enough to hurt, and gentle enough to leave a door open. An elder somewhere quietly adds one neat tick mark to his notepad, then slides it back into his coat. Picture a buggy rolling down the shoulder while trucks scream past at 70. The buggy doesn't argue, it just keeps its own pace and lets the noise pass. That's what a ban household looks like. The world roars and the family keeps eating at their 2 tables. The correction happens without a raised voice. Eli, watching all this, mostly wants to know who's stuck washing the second set of dishes. And that gap, the same house, the separate table, the pencil ticking away, sets up the harder question. If the rule is this careful, this survivable, then how does a whole district decide when to lift it, and who exactly holds the vote, which is where we go in Chapter 8, so you might picture Chapter 8 as one small Amish quirk. A funny old rule about tables and pencils. But that's not the strange part. The rule isn't a quirk at all. Chapter 8 works as a community rule, not a random habit some grandfather invented. Shunning looks harsh from outside, like a switch flipped off forever. Sharpen that picture. It's a discipline the whole district agrees to and can also lift. Here's what nobody expects. If shunning drove people away, the Amish should be shrinking. They aren't. The Young Center for Anabaptist and Pietist Studies at Elizabethtown College tracked the numbers through 2023. The Amish population doubles roughly every 20 years, from about 123,000 in 1991 to more than 390,000 by 2023. Doubled. That is not a group bleeding members out the back door. That is a group with a full waiting room. So the harsh rule and the growth sit side by side, and both are true. A discipline can be strict and still not empty the pews. Picture it on a country road. A buggy rolls along at 8 miles an hour, while a semi roars past hauling 40 tons of nothing urgent. The buggy doesn't flinch. The horse doesn't care about your schedule. That's roughly how the whole system moves. Slow, deliberate, and somehow still standing while faster things break down. And the elder in the corner keeps his little notepad handy. Someone bends a rule, and out it comes. One neat tick mark in pencil, unhurried, then back into the coat pocket. His face never changes. It's the calmest bookkeeping you have ever seen. Eli just stares at that notepad. So the pencil never runs out, he says. Good to know. But growth raises a sharper question than survival. If the district can add members and add tick marks at the same time, then someone has to decide the hardest thing of all. When does the discipline end, and who holds the vote to end it? So picture him again on those porch steps, plate on his knees, oil lamp flickering beside him. He eats alone tonight, but the door behind him was never locked. That's the thing everyone gets wrong about the shunning. It looks like a wall, and it's really a hand reaching back. The family through that lit window isn't pushing him toward the road. They're leaving a chair empty at the table, waiting. And 9 out of 10 times, he walks back through that door. Not because he's beaten, but because everything he loves is still on the other side of it. That's what the whole hard rule was always for. So when the people you love draw a line and then hold the gate open beside it, which one do you finally believe?